Today we've got questions on the Holy Roman Emperor, church property, and diplomacy. And of course, Charles gives us his thoughts on the coronation of the king. Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu, now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade Channel. Talk radio the way it should be at crusadechannel.com. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a coped and cringe-pilled Charles Coulombe.
Coped and cringe-pilled? What does that even mean? Coped and cringe-pilled? What is that supposed to be? Is that some sort of weird satire on based and red-pilled?
I don't know. I saw it on Twitter and I thought it was cool, and I wanted to be cool.
What sort of moron would put out some meaningless tripe like that? That's idiotic. I don't think I've ever heard anything quite that stupid. Who would come up with something like that?
I thought it was you, actually.
Oh, yeah, I do that. Well, okay, I guess it must have meant something at some point to somebody sometime somewhere. Not much to me. I do, though. I have to admit, I did get a little bit of a snicker out of myself when it just hit me in one phrase. Cringe-pilled. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what. Sometimes it pays to chew through the straps in the morning. You know, you really feel invigorated. And we learned from one of the patrons that the world is actually run by the by the Illuminati, and I think it's true. I think the Illuminati are in charge.
And Big Legume.
Yes, Big Legume, the Big Legume of Doom.
Oh yeah, of Doom. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. They're unfortunately they've completely taken power away from my secret society, the Inebriati. We've lost completely. We've lost all control over planet Earth and are basically stuck drinking to console ourselves.
That's right.
What do you do when you're a member of a secret society that had total control of the planet and then has nothing but a few discounts in some of the cheaper dive bars?
I don't know. What do you do?
You take advantage of the discounts, obviously. That seems kind of obvious.
Sure.
But, you go into the first cabin and you just sort of say, hey, and the bartender says, it's one of the Inebriati. Here's your cheap knockoff wine, Mr. Master of the Universe. I mean, when your own bartender makes fun of your once all-powerful secret society, you've cut down pretty low.
I agree. So, wow. So we just had the coronation yesterday.
We did, but before we touch on the coronation, I forgot to do something last week, which I meant to do, and I forgot.
Okay.
A shout out to Savio, a fan in Cork, Ireland, who made the Hajj to see me, came all the way to Dublin, 3 hours on the bus, to see me at St. Kevin's at Mass in Dublin a month ago. So shout out to Savio, who loves the show, and who happily lives in Erin's Green Isle.
Excellent. 3 hours on the bus. That's impressive.
I thought so. And 3 hours back, too.
Wow.
Yep. That's loyalty. So, Savio, thank you so much for coming up. I'm sorry I didn't remember last week, but I did this week, so I'm not completely out of it. And the funny thing about that trip, the first thing we saw was the Irish House of Lords in Dublin, in the old Parliament building, now the Bank of Ireland. The last thing we saw in Britain was the British House of Lords in Westminster Palace, the day that we came back to Austria. So the whole trip was bracketed between two Houses of Lords. And it's a good segue, don't you think? Clever, huh?
Yeah, very
clever. Segue? Mm-hmm. Smart segue?
Yes.
You like that segue, do you?
I do.
It's a good segue. I mean, as segues go.
Yeah, as far as segues go, yes.
Isn't that a neat word, segue?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's
Turn
not
turn turn off
pronounced
that
segu.
phone. Turn off that phone. That shows contempt for the
What? What
audience.
phone?
What phone?
What, this? What
All right.
phone? What are you
There we go. Oh,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah. Don't turn it off. Just put on silent. At least there. Okay, that's good enough.
But what
Anyhow,
about this? We were talking about segues. Or
segues.
segues, or
Yeah.
segues, segues, sejus.
Okay.
Are you all
So
right?
let's.
You seem a little pained.
So what was it a segue to?
Ah, yes. You touched on it before I gave my shout out to Savia.
Yeah.
Let's see how your short term memory is. What did you bring up?
I don't know. What was I talking about? I don't know. No, the
See?
coronation.
Ah, yes, the coronation. Bum, ba, bum, bum, bum. Oh no, that's the inauguration of the President of the United States, which we get to enjoy every 4 years. An affirmation of national unity. Well, all right, maybe not that. One of the things that occurred to me in the build-up to the coronation was that in 2016 the Democrats claimed that the Republicans stole the election. In 2020, the Republicans claimed the Democrats stole it. What if they're both right?
Well, then it's just a competition of cheating. Who cheats the best?
Who cheats the best? And I think if that's true, if they're both right, I think it speaks very well for our system.
It's the best system money can buy?
Yes, indeed. Just like we got the best justice money can buy. But seriously, I found out a little factoid about the coronation. Did you see it at all yesterday?
Yes, I watched all of it.
Do you remember the beautiful copes that the bishops and the bishopess were wearing, the golden robes?
Yeah, there was a lot of people wearing a lot of things. I'll say that. I don't. Those
But you
didn't jump
remember
out to me.
Well, remember the Archbishop of Canterbury, the sort of wispy guy that put the crown on the
Yes.
king's head?
Yes.
You remember who was wearing a golden cope?
Yes.
Well, several others were too. Are you ready for the terrible truth?
Okay.
They were loners from our cathedral, Westminster Cathedral.
Loners?
Yes, they were loaned to the Archbishop of Canterbury for the day.
Oh, I thought you meant like loner, like social isolation loner.
No. Yeah, break down all the barriers. Why should anything mean anything? The Illuminati are in charge. I'm telling you. No, they were loaned by Westminster Cathedral to the Abbey for the coronation.
Wow.
Because they were better looking apparently than anything that they had at the Abbey at that time.
What was the golden sort of robe that they put on Charles? It looked so ancient. It looked like it was like refurbished or something.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that? They never explained what that was.
No, they didn't. The reason. Well, first let me say a few things.
Okay. So
the coronation, like everything else about the British monarchy, is sort of the desiccated remains of a Catholic order. And you can see it, if you know what you're looking at, its origins scream at you. That's the first thing you've got to bear in mind. The only really Protestant thing about it is the oath that gets people so excited. Although it's a lot better than it used to be. The oath that William of Orange and his successors had was really terrible. It attacked transubstantiation and so on. It was dreadful. And finally, Edward VII, who was the first British king to go to a mass in public after James II, he got very, very annoyed about having to say it, and his son wouldn't. George V point blank refused to say it. So they came up with this one instead. So it's a much softened version of what was the thing before. But the Catholic elements, as I say, jump out at you. The robing in the cope, the dalmatic, and the stole. These are reminiscent of priests' vestments because they are priestly vestments. Well, that is not some weird Anglican thing. That goes back to Catholic days, Catholic coronations. Kaiser Karl had them. The kings of France had them. In the Catholic system, the monarch was considered, by virtue of the coronation, especially the anointing, was considered to be a sort of mixed person, part layman, part cleric, the chief layman of the realm. And for that reason, just to give you a few examples, the four greatest kings of Europe, the Holy Roman Emperor, the King of France, the King of Spain, and the King of England, all were made canons of Roman basilicas. So the Holy Roman Emperor was a canon of St. Peter's. The King of France, and now the President of France today, meaning Scummy Macron, were made canons of St. John Lateran. The kings of Spain are canons of St. Mary Major. And the kings of England were, until the Protestant revolt, canons of St. Paul outside the walls. And the interesting thing about that is that in return, until the Protestant revolt, the abbot of St. Paul's was the prelate of the Order of the Garter. And so if you go to the Garden of St. Paul, the monastery that's attached to the basilica, you will see the crest of the Garter in the garden. On soit qui mal y pense. And one of the reasons why that was the case, you notice that the cathedral in London is St. Paul's. And the basilica, back to medieval times, the basilica in Rome that they sponsored, that the British kings, the English kings sponsored, is St. Paul's. Both of those go back to the tradition that St. Paul preached in Britain, which is like the tradition that he preached in Spain. Anyway, so that's what that clothing was about. It's the same with the scepter, the two scepters, the three swords of state, the orb, all those very symbolic, but their symbolism goes back to Catholic days. Even the anointing with chrism is kind of interesting because, I'm sorry?
I must have missed that. When did that happen with the anointing with chrism?
Well, he went behind the screen. They brought out screens to conceal it from the audience.
Oh.
It's the most sacred part of the coronation. And in Catholic coronations, the anointing was seen as being linked to David's being anointed by Samuel. Remember that the theory of Catholic monarchy is that Catholic monarchs partake in the kingship of Christ. But that kingship, as we know it, is a result of the sort of merger between the Davidic kingship that Christ inherited according to his human nature, and the communio of the church that he created at that moment on Maundy Thursday. And that's why the foot washing was such a big thing at Catholic courts every Maundy Thursday. But at any rate, so having said all that, in Catholic times, most kings, and the Holy Roman Emperor, in fact, were anointed with the oil of catechumens. And that has a symbolism all its own. You get it when you're baptized to show that you're entering a royal priesthood. But 5 kings of Europe were allowed to be anointed with chrism like bishops. And these 5 were the King of France, the King of Scotland, the King of Sicily, or Naples as well. They're kind of a double deal there. The King of Jerusalem and the King of England. So the very reason why chrism is used instead of some other oil is because, you guessed it, of papal permission, long ago forgotten, but that's where it comes from. And that, again, if you know what you're looking at, it sort of shrieks. And the funny thing about this chrism is that for the first time since 16, when James II was anointed with oil consecrated by the Catholic Vicar Apostolic. King Charles was anointed with chrism validly consecrated by the Patriarch, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, which means and meant that for the first time since 1685, the king has been anointed with a valid sacramental. What effect that'll have on him, who knows? But nevertheless, it's happened. And it was this particular act that made the crowning of a king so, well, an eighth sacrament, as they used to say.
Wow. They in the commentary beforehand they said that Pope Francis gave pieces of the true cross, the relics, and they used
sure
it
did.
on the I guess in the cross for the procession.
Yes. Now, there's an interesting thing about that. The British, the English coat of arms, or the English crown jewels, unlike many other European sets of crown jewels, did not have a processional cross. But now it does. And many of the processional crosses from Catholic times in collections of the crown jewels feature pieces of the true cross, relics of the true cross. Here in Vienna, the imperial processional cross has a big chunk of it. So that's, it's odd that a medieval tradition was sort of revived, and of course by an Anglican.
Yeah. But okay.
So, and of course you have the usual morons yapping about the coronation. It wasn't egalitarian. It was a monument to white male rule over England. There was a picture of the king, the Prince of Wales, and the Prince of Wales' son. And this woman, oddly enough, called Charlotte Proudman, declared that this was, again, white male supremacy and blah blah blah. Somehow she seems already to have forgotten that they had a queen for 70 years. She's being an academic. She probably doesn't have much of a memory.
I hope we.
What?
It's funny how we get to troll liberals. And
I mean, just because they're stupid doesn't mean they're bad people. I mean, what is so bad with stupid anyway, huh? We had this conversation earlier tonight, and you said some terrible things about stupid people. I was shocked. I thought you were uncharitable. I thought you were unkind. I thought that I don't think you regard stupid people as having the same right of expressing themselves that, say, people with brains do.
Well,
I just don't think you do.
They shouldn't have that right.
That's what I'm saying. I think you feel that way. That's exactly what I think you think. I think you think stupid people should shut up. That's what I think you think.
Yes.
I think you think stupid people don't have a right to express their opinions.
Yes, can confirm.
That's shameful.
That's shameful.
That's shameful. Speaking on behalf of morons, idiots, and the mentally defective everywhere, I want you to know, and the senile as well, I want you to know that just because an individual is dumber than a bedpost doesn't mean he can't contribute mentally.
Ooh.
What?
Their mental contributions.
Yes. A mental contribution to the mental climate. Why can't stupid people have rights too? You look down on stupid people, especially in positions of authority. I know you do. I mean, and I've seen this before. I've seen it with government officials. I don't want to say IRS auditors, but you know who I'm talking about. I've seen it with all sorts of people, and just because they don't have the brains God gave a dead eel, you don't think they have a right to lord it over you.
You know, driving a car is not a right. That's actually a privilege, and you actually have to take a test, and you have to have some sort of competency. So if something as basic as driving a car is a privilege, why isn't you know like having a right to of voting? Why isn't that a privilege? What like car to me is even more basic. Like
Okay,
you're
here's why you're wrong.
okay.
All right. Number one, requiring voter ID is racist. Number two, that being so, requiring a driver's license is racist.
Okay, check.
And that being so, the all the falderall with going through driver's tests and all the rest of it is racist inherently.
I mean, do you need a driver's license to vote? I don't think you do. You can
No, you don't
you have
need
a
any.
different yeah.
You don't need any ID to vote because to have ID, to require ID, would be racist. Now, if that's true for voting, surely it's racist to require it for driving. You got to look at these things the right way. I'll give you another example. I'm going to get now 50, well, more like 70 years ago. A black couple tries to check into a hotel, in a whites only hotel, and they're
Okay.
refused admittance. That was racist, and it was struck down by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Well, Congress dealt with it through the Interstate Commerce Clause. Now, if I go in to a hotel today, they're going to demand ID.
Are they? Oh, only if you have a credit card
Yes,
or something, right? Only if you pay with a
but they
credit card.
won't. They won't let you in without a credit card, and they require ID.
Well, that's they don't take check. They don't take check. They don't take cash.
No, nope, nope, nope. Now that is inherently racist because if requiring ID for voting is racist, it must be racist for requiring it for driving, and therefore it's racist to demand ID when you check into a hotel.
Wow, I never thought
It's
about
also
that.
see, you got to look at these things the right way. And once you do, you'll stop this pointless crusade against the idiotic you've gotten yourself tied up with. You got to embrace the idiocy.
Well,
You see what I'm saying?
like
What you need to do is go up to somebody like Governor Newsom, throw your arms around him, and say, "I accept you unconditionally."
I don't know if I can do that though, Charles. I mean, that's a lot of showers I would need afterwards.
Yeah, maybe a
I don't know
quick
if I have
bath
the
in Lysol. But I mean, I could say the same for myself with Justin Trudeau. And in time for the coronation, little Justine came up with something special.
Oh, what did he do?
She it.
Sorry, I don't know his pronouns or their pronouns or pronouns.
She it.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
but Justine has decided to replace the St. Edward's crown on all the Canadian heraldry with a new crown because the cross on the top of the crown and the fleur de lis are religious symbols, and he wants them. They are to be replaced. The fleur de lis on the body of the crown will be replaced with maple leaves, and the cross on top of the crown will be replaced. And I'm not joking. It sounds like one of my gags. It's not. Are you ready? The cross will be replaced with a snowflake. Embrace idiocy. Come on, Vinny. Little Justine is a moron, And Sheehan is Prime Minister of Canada. You've got to show love and acceptance.
That's
Let me hear
breathtaking. That's taking the breath away. That's how.
emptying the breath from the room. Little Justine, a pile of need. So, I need to hear you say, I accept Justine unconditionally.
I mean, I accept. I mean, we were just talking about this, like an oath or whatever. Like when you say words, like you have to take it. What does it mean to accept? You know,
Embrace idiocy.
embrace idiocy.
Embrace idiocy.
I mean, there is good money in that racket.
There's huge money in that racket. If I were doing a self-help deal, we talked about this on the pre-show, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking about a life coach of our acquaintance online. We don't know him personally. But this gentleman, in return for spewing drivel, one-on-one sessions, $200 an hour. Isn't that amazing? That boy learned to embrace idiocy, and he going all the way to the bank with it. Man. How do I get on that gravy train? How do you get on it, more importantly? Huh?
I know. Whew. Okay, so
you seem somewhat dazed.
I'm fatigued at all this idiocy. You know, it's fatiguing. You know.
You see, if you embrace it, it'll stop. You'll lose the desire to think. And that's not all. Why do you think the snowflake is a beautiful symbol for little Justine?
I don't know, because he is one? I don't know.
Of course! You see self-acceptance there. And he's imposed his self-acceptance on the rest of Canada. But, that's one of the perks. That's one of the perks of being Prime Minister, You get to do whatever you want. It's a demonstration of what Oscar Wilde defined democracy as.
What is that?
The bludgeoning of the people, by the people, for the people. See, Oscar knew, embrace the idiocy. If I were running for office, that would be my motto these days. Embrace the idiocy. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, let's be as stupid as we can.
You'd have I feel like you'd have a lot more mottos than that. I feel like we've talked about this. You've got live the cliche. Yes, I don't know. There's a lot in
live
there.
The cliche is one of my favorites. It is true. well, these are the things that have allowed me to get through 62 years of a declining civilization. Look, if you took the me that lived 40 years ago and plopped him down in the middle of all this nonsense, he'd run screaming.
Why vote for the lesser of two evils? We've got the Cthulhu model.
That's right. Or Alfred E. Newman's thing. You remember? The nation stands on the brink of ruin. Let him finish the job. Oh, there's so much we can do, ladies and gentlemen. Just embrace the idiocy and you'll feel so much better.
All right. Did we cover the coronation to your satisfaction? Is there anything else?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I had a very, I thought, pleasant and enjoyable talk with Taylor Marshall on the day of the coronation, at his request. And so, what I like most about it, ladies and gentlemen, is that despite my advising everyone to embrace the idiocy, having a reasonable, pleasant conversation with someone who disagrees with you is one of those lost pleasures of our time. The idea that you can, as they used to say, disagree without being disagreeable, that you can have differing points of view and not go after each other with tomahawks.
Yeah.
That used to be a measure of something we called, oh gosh, it's been such a long time. Hold on. We used to call it, I can remember. I remember maturity.
Yeah.
It used to be an attribute of being what was called, I remember this because we used to use the word grown up. You didn't have to demonize everybody you disagreed with on every point, and you didn't have to weaponize your conversation. You
Yeah.
could actually try to figure out each other's point of view. Fortunately, we've gotten past that now. We're back down to the nursery where we belong. Yeah, you're a bad person.
I was thinking about this so much, the tendency to sort of stay away from or remove people who you have substantial disagreements with, or maybe even little disagreements with, honestly. Like, I've seen
Oh,
a lot of this.
it's gone to little.
Yeah,
It's gone to
it
little.
has gone to little. I've noticed that. Like, I'm really surprised. And you know, one of my theories is I feel like, now this is just, I'm just brainstorming here. That is almost a function of prosperity in a sense, because if you think about, at least for me, and middle class people, if something is uncomfortable or not kind of up to snuff or not working, you get rid of it and you upgrade. If you have an old television set, it's kind of not working, you get a new one. If this couch is a little uncomfortable now, it's got springs, you get a new one. And that's sort of that
I,
mentality, right? Like, we have that power to get everything we want to our satisfaction. And to what extent is that translating to people?
well, I honestly, I hate to say this, but it makes one sort of infantile.
Right. Right.
Because little ones have to have things just their way, or they cry and they get sets.
Right.
Oh, so yeah. And so much discourse today is really a quote unquote more adult version of eh. And you can do that if you like, but you're not going to have a dialogue. You just have two big elderly babies yapping at each other, which is fun if you like that kind of thing. Embrace the idiocy. But if you don't like that kind of thing, it's not so much fun. And you see, the problem is I'm so old that some of us were taught that as you get older, you're supposed to try to become more mature. Fortunately, that's something we were able not to teach our children. So it's kind of a lost art. It's died with us. It's, I don't know, like speaking Cornish.
Okay.
What?
Okay. Cornish, got
You
it.
look, you're looking very. All of a sudden, you're looking cautious, like you're looking at a pothole, and you're wondering how deep it goes. You get that look. What are you afraid of? I can tell you're afraid. You're feeling cautious. I think your antennae are out. But
Oh, I totally forgot. Well, break for channel identification. Off the Menu is now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade channel. Talk radio the way it should be at crusadechannel.com.
Woo! Saved by the Bell is our Vinny.
Woo! All right.
Sir.
So wait, I completely forgot where we were. So we're talking about Taylor Marshall. You really were talking about interesting things about, like, people and relationships and disagreements. Okay, so that was great. Anything else on the coronation?
Oh man, somebody doesn't want to go down a rabbit hole. All right, fine. I don't care. Be that way. No, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, you'll have to excuse us giggling cucks here in giggling cuckland. Oh gosh, do you remember when we first got called that? That was fun. I
That
like
was
that.
great. That was early on. I love that.
Giggling cucks. People don't say cuck anymore, do they?
No, I guess it got out of fashion. I don't know.
How about cuckcore?
Don't say that. That's just
Cuckcore.
don't say that. That's no. Okay, it's not.
It's a subculture based on being a cuck.
Don't say.
I think that's great. How about being cuck-pilled?
That's so stupid.
Oh, stupid now. You're not embracing the idiocy. I can tell. You're still refusing the treatment. All right, fine. Be that way. You know, if you want to lose out, if you don't want to get what everyone else is getting. Oh, man. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it should be illegal to enjoy yourself this much, and I can't help it. It is cuckcore, though. I think that could be a whole subculture.
I like cuck-pilled. I do like cuck-pilled.
Is it your cope?
No. All right. So
well, took care of that issue.
you wanted me to read this feedback we got about the Taylor Marshall show, so I'm going to read that. Kyle wrote in and he said, regarding Charles Coulombe's wager with Taylor Marshall on the Taylor Marshall broadcast concerning the future coronation of Prince William, I call and match his wager and raise it that not only will there be an archbishopess, but that the archbishopess will either be non-binary gender or a biological male. What are your thoughts? Call or raise, Charles?
Calling. No way I'm raising on that thing. Forget it. No way. No way. I'm not wagering any money on this. I mean, that was the thing. One of the places that Taylor and I disagreed on was the benefit, shall we say, of the coronation and the monarchy as it stands. Taylor's a monarchist as far as Catholic monarchies go, but of course he resents, and not without reason, the oath to be Protestant. Although, as I pointed out to him, for all those people who've been yapping about, oh, it's terrible that he's a syncretist and not a Christian. Well, he says he is a Christian. He's taken an oath that he's a Protestant. So we don't need to hear any more syncretism. We just don't need to hear that anymore. He may not be Catholic, but we know he's not a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, or a Theosophist. And if you don't like it, tough. However, having said all that, one thing we're certainly agreed on is the probable, if things continue as they are in Britain and the world, then I suspect the next coronation will feature the Archbishopess of Canterbury. As it was, there were several bishopesses in the crowd. So, and that'll be 10 years, 15, 20, who knows, but it'll be sooner rather than later. I may not see it, but you very well could. So, in fact, you probably will.
Yeah,
so
I should hope so.
Yeah, so it's really that's kind of a melancholy thing. But one of the questions he asked me was whether I thought that this should be a celebratory day. And himself and a lot of other thinking American Catholics say, well, it should be the day of penance and this and that. Well, my response was, do you celebrate the 4th of July? And he looked at me for a minute. I said, should you celebrate it? He said, yes, because it celebrates the independence of being in the country and all that. And I said, really? Well, I'm French Canadian. And what the 4th of July means to me is the denunciation of the Quebec Act, by which King George III gave my ancestors our freedom of religion, which the signers of the Declaration wanted to take away from us. Now, and he began to come up with an argument. And I said, no, no, hold on. I said, the fact is, a lot has happened since 1776. It's not the same world. And my family came down to this country, or well, I should say that country since I'm in Austria, and did very well. And I love the United States, and I celebrate the 4th, but I don't celebrate it because a bunch of yahoos hated the Catholic Church. I celebrate it because of what that country has become and what it's done for me and everyone else. That's what I celebrate on the 4th. So similarly, when Catholics, and it's interesting, a number of people have picked up on this, the descendants of the Recusant Catholics, like the Duke of Norfolk, who organized the coronation as Earl Marshal, the most loyal Catholics in England and Scotland, and even Ireland and places, are the descendants of the Recusant families who kept the faith all during the terrible penal times, because things are not what they were then. And the monarchy means to them what the flag used to mean to Americans. And it's more than that too. It's a living link with the whole history of their country, whatever its imperfections. It's a link to Shakespeare and King Arthur and Robin Hood. And that it's very difficult for us to understand that because we haven't been around very long.
Yeah. My 2 cents on the coronation, obviously it's sort of a deformed and obviously non-ideal, but I feel like just the ritual itself and where it is right now, it incites the imagination. It's almost like Star Spangled Crown, the book, where it's like people didn't even think of this. Like, obviously as Catholics, like, we're in that realm more, our minds are there more, but most of the world is actually not at all. Like, I was talking with some people who were Christian, and they're not even aware that, I mean, they pretty much think that like the birth control pill is literally the only way in terms of like art. Like, they're not even aware. There's so many people that aren't even aware of just good aspects of things. We're so immersed in just stuff.
Well, even as Catholics, most of us do not apply our religious imagination to politics, to the political realm. I mean, I had a fellow say to me that he was astonished at the swords of state and all that military stuff on the altar. And he said, I thought that was Anglican. I said, it's not Anglican. That's the way it is at Catholic coronations. Because just as the Church of England is in every aspect of English life today, the Catholic Church was in England and every other country in Europe, in everything, in every community, in hospitals, in the army, in schools, and universities. Just as you'll find an Anglican presence in every element of English life today, you found a Catholic presence. And that is the way it should be in a Catholic country. And the coronation is a reminder, if you know what you're looking at, it's a reminder of those times, which, please God, may come again, if we deserve them, which is, of course, a whole other issue.
And just the beauty of it, like, just like the beauty of the church, like, people, like, even on a basic level, like, people don't even see church, like, just converting people from liking things that are ugly to liking things that are beautiful, from stupid modern art to beautiful architecture. My wife and I actually agreed that one of our favorite parts of this coronation was the carriage. That carriage was unbelievable. It was beautiful, so gorgeous.
Beauty is see, there are 3 things: the true, the good, and the beautiful.
Yes.
And they're connected.
Yes.
If something is not beautiful, it's not true and it's not good. If it's not good, it's not beautiful and it's not true. And if it's not true, it's not good and it's not beautiful. And that, well, I mean, all you have to do is compare Westminster Abbey, built by devout Catholics, with our cathedral in Los Angeles. Imagine a coronation there.
In the words of Cardinal Dolan, let's not. All right.
Okay.
Um,
I'll say St. Patrick's Cathedral, I wouldn't mind a coronation in.
yeah, I like St. Patrick's. Okay. Uh, One last thing. So, my question being, what robe did Charles have on him? That ancient-looking
Oh,
golden robe.
you mean the beginning or after?
It was before the crowning.
Yeah,
Um,
before the crowning of this, the robe of state that I guess his grandfather wore. Or did you mean then, of course, after the, what was it before the crown? They
it looked
changed
like it had
clothes.
flowers on. It was like this golden thing, and it had one or two flowers or something
That
like
was
that.
golden. No, that was the he had the dalmatic, he had the cope, and he had the stole
Huh.
after the anointing. And before the anointing, he had the robe of state, which is red, sort of a red velvety looking thing.
I see.
And that showed the nature that you had in Catholic theology regarding coronations, that the king was a mixed person. This is not just the English king, all Catholic kings and the emperor. That is to say, they were both at once partly a layman and partly a cleric. And as a result of that, well, did I mention this or the pre-show about the canon race?
Probably
I
pre-show.
forget. Pre-show? Well, on at his coronation, the Holy Roman Emperor he'd be enrolled as a canon of St. Peter's. The King of France would be enrolled as a canon of St. John Lateran, King of Spain of St. Mary Major, the King of England of St. Paul outside the walls. But interestingly enough, because of this status, if the Holy Roman Emperor was in Rome for the papal mass, he served as deacon. And if the King of France was there, he served as subdeacon at the papal mass. And the King of France would receive from when he would go to mass, he received from the chalice like a priest.
Wow.
And so these little things all went to show the nature of Catholic monarchy, of sacred monarchy.
The last thing I guess the last detail I really want to touch on that we didn't fully touch on is I don't know what the formal term is, but basically the three screens that protected the king that they had men hold and
Yeah.
kind of have this isolated thing. Can you talk about that and what were on those two, and were they old, were they new, and what do they symbolize?
Well, they were sort of Greek, I think, but they were new.
Okay.
The reason why is that the anointing is the most sacred part of the coronation. Now, in 1953, because before things were televised, this wasn't an issue. But in 1953, the Queen had to decide what would be filmed and what would not. And she decided not to have the anointing filmed and not to have her reception of communion filmed. Well, this time, the king decided that the anointing would take place behind a screen and not be filmed that way. With the Queen, they just turned the cameras away. But in the yesterday, they brought in these screens, which was sort of had kind of Greek iconic things on them. But what was done, I thought this was very interesting, was his reception of communion and that of the Queen was shown on TV.
Kind of. I thought it was far away.
It was far away. It was zoomed, and the focus was on something else.
Yeah.
But you could see him take the bread in his hand and then drink from the chalice, which his mother would not allow to be shown. And presumably, he had a reason for wanting it to be seen, even off in the distance like that.
So
You can, in fact, I suspect that doing it that way, on the one hand, did give him a certain amount of privacy, but on the other hand, also showed his subjects that he is a communicant of the Church of England.
he has that kind of creative control. I just thought they had cameras all over the place in on the church, and that each media company goes, chooses what they want to look at.
No. Those, it was a big question beforehand because, as I say, the Queen forbade those two things to be shown, and he could have done so if he wished to. One of the other new things he did was the prayer that he said in the beginning of the. He composed that himself. So if you want a personal statement of belief, that's pretty much it. And the other interesting thing too, at least, well, interesting to me anyway, was that see, he did that prayer himself. There was something else I wanted to say, and it slipped my mind. Well, can't be that important, but it was certainly an interesting thing. The Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster being there, as well as the nuncio, was the first in hundreds of years. They held on to the most essential parts of the rite, and some of the new elements weren't bad. Some of them one could have done without. But yay or nay, the most important things were accomplished, and now he is truly the anointed king.
The other thought that hit me too, because you almost get wound up a little bit, where it's talking about the language is almost like it seems to go with more in-depth governance by his hand, in talking about mercy for judgment and this and that. And the old language, it almost made you want it to continue. Like, well, you're saying all these things, but you're not even doing them, right?
That's true. And of course, you also have the greater irony. I've studied this man for over 3 decades. I've read everything I could get my hands on, which is quite a bit of what he's written. I have followed very carefully the different programs he's backed in all sorts of areas, education, architecture, of course, providing not just jobs, but business opportunities for young people and a lot of other things. I disagree very much with his views on climate change and on population and so forth. But those are the superstitions that are common to the entire ruling class, including the Holy Father. And you can't really expect more out of the king than you can out of the Pope. Well, you can, but good luck with it. I have to say that what he's solid on, which is a lot of stuff, I'd say I agree with about 75% of what he's into. And despite his failings, despite his marital problems, despite everything else, he's better than the vast majority of trash that's been presented to me to vote for. And so, yes, I think that if all the oaths and everything that was said yesterday were literally true, his kingdoms would be in a far, far better state than they are or are likely to become. If when he gave a command that was done by the government in Canada, and it was literally and truly done this day by my hand in our city of Ottawa, by command, God save the king. Well, then it was like with the accession proclamations that they had all over the Commonwealth. I mean, those, they're beautiful. Just to remind you and our listeners and viewers of the accession proclamation text, uh, they varied slightly from place to place, but in Britain it was this: whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to His mercy our late sovereign lady Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We therefore, the Lords spiritual and temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London, and others, do now hereby with one voice and consent of tongue and heart publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege Lord Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. Given at St. James's Palace this 10th day of September, in the year of our Lord 2022. God save the King. Wow. Wow. And that sort of sublime mummery, and I'm sad I have to call it mummery, is repeated over and over. There is, when the king gives, or the governor general, or whomever, gives the address in reply, because basically what happens is that the king or the viceroy gives a speech called the Speech from the Throne, in which, although he talks about my government will do this and such, it's actually written by the prime minister. And the address in reply from the House is then debated. Now, the debate basically is defending and attacking the government's policy. But once it's done, once the debate is done, the address and reply, which is a pro forma, a pro forma thing, is then sent to the king or the governor general. So oh, that's too bad. They changed the New Zealand thing to be stupid. But in most places, the address and reply is very, very much like the language you just heard. Here we go. This is typical. This is the address and reply. And they've got versions of, they vary according to the Parliament, but this is the one for the British Parliament. Most gracious sovereign, we, your majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Lords spiritual and temporal and Parliament assembled, beg leave to thank your majesty for the most gracious speech which your majesty has addressed to both houses of Parliament. And the one that the one that they have in the version in Canada and Australia and all that will be we, Her Majesty's most loyal subjects, the House of Representatives of the state of Victoria, do hereby thank Your Excellency for the speech, and wish to signify our undying attachment to Her Majesty's throne in person. It's all that kind of stuff. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And yet at least half of the morons connected to it are Republicans. And what makes me kind of giggle, Catholic peoples are incapable of doing this kind of thing. They just can't. So in Quebec, all of this stuff was abolished in 1968. But what I found interesting in reading an historical discussion of the abolition in French was that they referred to all of that. And again, only a French Canadian would come up with this phrase, and it's so beautiful and so true. They referred to it as the liturgie parlementaire, the parliamentary liturgy. And that's what it is. The speech from the throne, the most gracious address and reply, and blah, blah, blah. The liturgie parlementaire. And that's exactly what it is. And because the French Canadians, as a result of the Quiet Revolution, lost their belief in the throne as well as the altar, they could no longer do it anymore. It's like the scumbag who's the current premier of Quebec taking the crucifix down from the speaker's chair, which had been there since the 30s. He had to. Can you imagine how dreadful it is for a bunch of worthless, overpaid morons to have to look at the crucifix, a sign they no longer believe in? Oh, the poor little darlings, their consciences. And that is why the worthless Justin Trudeau had to get rid of the fleur-de-lis and the cross from the heraldic crown in Canada. Because his little baby conscience had hurt. Poor little worthless scumbag. So sad. The utter morons. So I wish a magic wand could be waved. I wish a cheek could be kissed, a sword drawn from a stone, a challenge uttered to a giant that would make all that wonderful phraseology we have heard since the accession magically come to life. I would love it if the king were indeed in a position to do justice and to maintain the rights of his peoples. Because today, what would that mean? In days gone by, it was to keep the peasants from slaughtering the lords and the lords from oppressing the peasants. That was the king's job then, and defending the whole of them from outside attack. Now, what should the modern role of a king be? I'll tell you, it's what Franz Josef told President Teddy Roosevelt after he retired and came to Vienna on a visit. Roosevelt said, "Well, Your Majesty, what do you see your role as a modern monarch being?" And he said, "Defending my people from their politicians." And that is precisely the role that is needed, and precisely the role that the myth of democracy will deny both the king and his subjects. Leaving power securely where it belongs. Embrace the idiocy. Let us continue to be ruled by mental munchkins and moral midgets. That's the way. Power to the people, the right people, the people who have it already, the people who can send us into our rooms in our masks, the people who showed us over COVID where power really is. And that is the problem with the coronation in a larger sense, because it reminds us, A, it wasn't always this way. But if that's true, then B, maybe it doesn't have to stay this way. Maybe things could be different. But that would be a thought crime. And you know the one thing worse than a thought crime?
What?
Another favorite for a word of mine, a hate fact.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
You remember the hate facts?
Yes, I do. All right. We are over an hour, so we're going to have to do some... We're going to have to
shuffle along.
We're going to have to shuffle along. I do want to touch on one last thing because I feel like we're on such a roll on this topic. I've seen on Twitter lately, various prominent Catholics are mentioning this. I know Eric Sammons mentioned this. He says support for monarchy in America is up to 12%. And they're pretty cool numbers. Long story short, to summarize the data, basically the younger the demographic, the higher the support for monarchy is. So your comments on that, Charles?
Well, it's funny. I saw that too on Twitter. It's supposed to be, I think, the youngest group that they have. I don't know, 18 to 35 or something. I don't remember exactly the years. Was 27%. It was 3% in my age group, and 0% in over 65.
Yeah.
And then it was 20% between the young and my age. And when I saw that on Twitter, somebody wrote, Coulombe, what have you done? Blaming me. And the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, it's not really me at all. I'm glad to say. Unfortunately, the reason for it is a very unhappy one. And it comes from two different directions. The one is the fact that the leadership of the United States has become so incredibly ridiculous and stupid and toxic. The Democrats claim their election was stolen in 2016. The Republicans claim it was stolen in 2020. Maybe they're both right. Who knows? I don't. What I do know is that that sort of thing is not going to build confidence in their institutions among the young. But then there's a second problem, which directly stems from the fecklessness and stupidity of the rulership. And that is, they don't teach civics. In my day, we were taught how the Republic worked. We were taught about the Bill of Rights. We were taught about all sorts of things. And with that, to worship them as divine. The Constitution is a divine document and so on. Well, of course, I don't believe that. But there are a lot of elements of the Constitution and so on that, work pretty well and are fairly admirable, or have worked anyway. And the kind of fondness for the institutions that you can only get by knowing about them, the younger generation can't have because they're never taught. So, if you will, imagine, and they're not taught history too. And remember, even the salvation history that we were taught was history of a sort. It's not taught anymore. So you're a young person, all right? You're not taught about the great heroes of the revolution. You're not taught about the revolution. I mean, obviously, if I were teaching the class, the loyalists would be the heroes. But it just isn't there. The Constitution, its history isn't there. Nothing is there. So what the leadership have done is to create a huge educational vacuum. And so without any kind of background in understanding the institutions under which they live, the young are stuck only being able to experience what is handed to them. They can only evaluate these institutions, and believe me, that's only half the story if this is the only thing you can do, on the basis of the garbage they're served up in steaming piles. And for some reason, a lot of them don't particularly care for the piles of steaming rectitude that they're shoved at them. So, ironically, although I'm very happy that my ideas are given much more of a hearing than they were, I'm saddened by the fact that it is a result of the failure of the system under which I was raised. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say so.
So it's, I wish I could say that I was, and don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you young folk out there who have embraced monarchism, especially if I've helped you do so, don't get me wrong, I'm all for it and I'm glad you have. That's not my point. My point is that, well, I'm a bit like a late Roman. I know I live in a pagan setup. I know it's falling apart because of its own implicits, but it's the only system I know, and I can't be expected to rejoice in its decay and collapse.
Of course.
But I have an attachment to it that younger folks simply can't have. I mean, I remember I was back in 2014, I was at a Catholic thing in Connecticut, and a young attorney from New Haven said to me, to you still have a sentimental attachment to the Constitution. To me, the Constitution is just the guarantee of abortion.
Yeah.
What attachment am I supposed to have to that? And it's a fair question, and not one that I could simply laugh off.
So, when I looked at those numbers for pro-monarchist sentiment, I felt like they were so dramatic. They immediately reminded me of a different set of numbers, but it was people who identified as being part of LGBTQ in one of those, and it was a similar sort of sloping graph where the oldest people are very low numbers, and then as you get younger and younger, it starts to skyrocket. And so obviously I interpreted those numbers as meaning, okay, well, that's because the thing got into the education system, and being gay, you're part of the cool kids club, right? So there are obvious reasons for that. What's interesting about the monarchist one is it's completely against what is sort of instilled in the education system, which is very anti-monarchist sentiment.
Yeah.
So how do you explain that? I mean, how does it break through? How do we still have those numbers despite the headwinds, shall we say?
Well, I mean, every force breeds a counterforce. And quoting Yates again, as I did last week, the center cannot hold. The fact is that we had one of the big things about the United States is that we have always been based on a certain kind of compromise, a religious compromise, a social compromise, all in the name of freedom. But what's happened is that one end of the spectrum has become completely predominant and are in no mood to compromise because they're in power. But inevitably, human nature being what it is, that misuse and abuse of power breeds a counterweight. Now, if this continues along these lines, we've had this discussion before. What I'm very fearful of is eventual civil unrest leading to anything from the never-ending street fighting of the Weimar Republic to a real civil war. And then beyond that, either or both a strongman and the breaking up of the country. And I don't really like any of those. And I've got people who say to me, well, let it come. Accelerationists. Let's just get finita la commedia. Let's just get it all done with. Well, it's easy to say that. But as these things resolve themselves, real people get hurt, real people die, real cities go up in flames.
Yeah, that's just sort of, to me, that's just theory. You're looking something from that's like saying socialism is good from like a theory standpoint, and then like it hits and it's like, oh, oops.
Yeah, oops, indeed. Buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I wouldn't be able to make over $2,500 a year. Well,
yeah.
I didn't realize my kids wouldn't be able to go to university, or if they did, they'd have to become party apparatchiks. I didn't realize that. Careful what you wish for. So, again, I mean, not to get too dramatic, but going back to our other two great periods of breakup, our first and second revolution/civil wars, I have no doubt I would have been a loyalist had I been around for the first one. And at the beginning of the second, I would have been for constitutional union. And if I were a Northerner, I probably would have been a Copperhead. If I'd been a Southerner, I probably would have been a Unionist, like Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee. They were not in favor of secession.
Okay. So, well, Charles, we're at an hour and 15-minute mark. I haven't asked any of the questions. I think I'm gonna switch things around a little bit for us. I'm just gonna like ask the memes, or I'm gonna push the memes and the questions to next episode that we had, because I feel like you said so much. I'd like people to be able to digest them and think about them, and rather than sort of scatter the talking points around, because I feel like you've said so much. It's a lot of food for thought. Is that okay that I'm not going to make you do a 2-hour show, or are you okay? We can do a 2-hour show if you want.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Okay.
That's all right. I guess I can survive. But you could at least give me the state of the week.
The state of the week? You want to do the state of the week still?
I want to do the state of the week, yeah.
Okay. All right. State of the week is Pennsylvania.
Are you sure I didn't do Pennsylvania
You
before?
absolutely did not, because I've been waiting for it. I love Pennsylvania so much. I have family in Pennsylvania. You never did Pennsylvania.
Okay, no. There's Erie, Pennsylvania. It's a nice place. It's on Lake Erie.
All right. That'll do it for this episode.
No. No, I'm not going to do that to you. Forget it. No, well, the place to start, of course, is in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is chock-a-block with stuff to see. Independence National Park, with Independence Hall, the Museum of the Constitution, the Museum of the American Revolution, the Shrine of St. John Neumann, St. Peter and Paul Cathedral. There's so much to see in Philly. It's really a neat town. Ivy Hall, where I spoke for the oh Lord, what are the names? Oh Lord, I can't think of the society. They're wonderful people. Catholic Men's Society that run these things at Ivy Hall.
No, I remember. I don't have it either.
The kind of saints that carry their heads in their hands. There's a term for it, which is I'm blocked on, and that's the name of the society, and I can't think of it. Well,
I see.
It'll come to me at 3 a.m. Doesn't matter. And then there's Graham Park, which was one of the residence of one of the governors. There's the Philly Zoo. There's all sorts of things having to do with Benjamin Franklin and the Merchants Hall, the Mummers Parade on New Year's Day, and the Mummers Museum for the rest of the year. Mumming being an old European, old English custom that has survived in Philadelphia. And Scrapple, of course, delicious Scrapple. Old Bookbinders, I'm afraid, is closed down, but I think there's a restaurant occupying the premises now that's supposed to be decent. So that's Philly. But then you go out to the hinterland, and the first thing you run into in places like Lancaster and York are old Catholic churches dating to colonial times, like Old St. Mary's and Old St. Joseph. In Philly, you run into the Pennsylvania Dutch country. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Many different kinds of Pennsylvania Dutch, from Schwenkfelders to Amish, to Mennonites, to Catholics. And a lot of colonial, just like in upstate New York and in New England, a lot of colonial stuff scattered throughout eastern Pennsylvania. But there's an old joke about Pennsylvania. And the joke is that it's Pennsylvania is Philadelphia and Pittsburgh separated by Alabama or by Kentucky.
I heard that before, yeah.
Pennsylvania is a name. So you get out into the rural areas, you leave the Pennsylvania Dutch, and you find yourself amongst the Ulster Scots. And then you get further west, you come to Pittsburgh. There are all sorts of ethnic Catholic groups in Pittsburgh. And there are in other places, Scranton, places like that, where you'll find, oh Lord, there's a nationality. What are they called? They're just northeast of Austria. They're north of Hungary. You'll find Hungarians there too, but there's another people. They're Slavs. They're north of Hungary. They have a lot of Eastern Rite people there in the coal country. There's a name for them.
Are you saying Czech? What do you?
No, they're like Czechs, but they're not Czechs. They're different from Czechs. They eat pierogies. What are they called?
Magyars?
No, those are the Hungarians. They're north of there. There are people, they put carp in their bathtubs at Christmas time.
What are you talking about? Are
It's
you
just
are
stretching out
you
in.
are you talking
Am I
about?
what? Am I what?
I don't know what you're doing, Charles. What are you doing?
All right, there's a group of people, and you'll find them in Pennsylvania. And at Christmas time, they like to eat carp
I
for
mean, did you
Christmas
not
Eve.
say Slovaks? I thought you said Slovaks.
Oh, no. Oh, that's right. That's what they're called. No, I didn't mention them.
Okay, I thought you were saying
I'm
someone
sorry.
other than Slovaks. Okay.
I did. I didn't mention Slovak. Thank you for reminding me. It's Slovaks. That's right. I knew
Okay.
that. So a lot of Eastern Rite and Western Rite Slovaks and other Eastern Europeans scattered throughout Pennsylvania. But Pittsburgh is quite a center of them as well. But in Pittsburgh, you will find a very beautiful cathedral. You will find the Fort Duquesne Museum. Fort Duquesne being originally a French fort built before the First Civil War. And of course, and I neglected, I can't believe I did this, ladies and gentlemen, I feel stupid. Two important Revolutionary and Civil War sites. Valley Forge, which not only has a wonderful Valley Forge National Monument, has really, really worthwhile place, and with it, showing the role of the Episcopal Church, the American Anglicans, as our state church. There's the George Washington Memorial Chapel, which is an Episcopalian church adjoining the Valley Forge battleground, so you can get really into the state faith, and Gettysburg, the Great Civil War battle. I can't believe I almost forgot to mention Gettysburg. That was bad. And lastly but not leastly, you do have what we opened with, Erie.
You didn't even talk about Allen. Did you talk about Allentown?
No, and I didn't talk about Scranton or Bethlehem or Nazareth. These are all actually all worth seeing. They're industrial towns with heavily Eastern European backgrounds. Think The Deer Hunter, if you're a movie buff. And you'll get all the pierogies and poppy-seeded pasta you can imagine. Great area.
Poppy-seeded pasta.
Yeah. Like, they'll serve you these bow tie pasta with poppy seeds.
Wow. Okay. I feel like you didn't cover half of Pennsylvania. There's so much more. I'm just okay.
Well, I can only talk about what I've actually seen, what I've been to.
Okay.
I mean, I've been through a lot of Pennsylvania. The problem is that I'm so often driving through Pennsylvania to get somewhere else. And if I'm going to stop, where will I stop? I'll stop in Philly. I'll stop at Gettysburg, Valley Forge. I'll stop at Pittsburgh. There's a church, St. Boniface, in Pittsburgh, with one of the largest collections of relics in the United States. It's amazing. And of course, Scranton is the headquarters of the Fraternity of St. Peter, one of their major places. It's also the headquarters of one of the two schismatic groups to break away from the Church of the United States, the Polish National Catholic Church. And interestingly enough, when they broke away in the 1800s, they allied with the continental Old Catholics in what was called the Union of Utrecht. But about 20 years ago, when the continental Old Catholics brought in priestesses, the Polish nationals broke with them. And then later encouraged the formation of small conservative priestess-less groups in Europe. And they formed a union with these groups, which is called the Union of Scranton. Now, regardless of content, I think the Union of Utrecht sounds a lot more impressive than the Union of Scranton.
I agree. Isn't Utrecht? Utrecht, isn't that like an old um isn't that like
Old
something
medieval.
Dutch or something?
Yeah, it's in the Netherlands, and it's
Yeah.
the center of the Dutch Old Catholics. It's
Yeah.
a old medieval town. 3 cathedrals, one the medieval cathedral, which is now a Dutch Reformed church, the Catholic cathedral, and the Old Catholic cathedral.
Yeah. I don't know, Charles. There's a lot more in Pennsylvania. What about Punxsutawney? Good old Punxsutawney. Am I right?
Oh yes, Punxsutawney and Punxsutawney Phil. There's another town in Pennsylvania that does the same thing, but it's the Groundhog Day
Yeah.
thing. Every Candlemas, Punxsutawney Phil comes out of his burrow, and they figure what the weather's going to be like from that.
What's the big Amish town? Is that Lancaster?
Lancaster, yeah. I
Have you
mentioned
ever been there?
Lancaster in York. I have.
Oh, is it really over the top? Is it like a
Well,
culture shock?
no, because the Amish live amongst the normal people, and they keep themselves to themselves a lot. You'll see their buggies on the road, and you'll see them shopping and all that. But there's not. No, and of course, there's a big market for Amish arts and crafts, especially the hex signs that keep off the, bad magic. Hexing is a big thing amongst the Pennsylvania Dutch.
Are Amish Christian? Technically,
Yeah,
are they? Yeah. Okay.
yeah. The Amish are they're a spinoff of the Mennonites, who in turn are a spinoff of the Anabaptists.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, This was a fun episode, Charles.
You said you had a question connected to the state of the week.
All right, Jared. Jared says, "Hello. This question may be better suited for whenever Pennsylvania is the state of the week. However, my question to Charles is this: Has Charles ever visited St. Anthony Chapel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? It is home to the largest collection of relics outside the Vatican. If he has visited, what did he think of it? Wow, that's quite a
I,
statement. Largest collection
I,
of relics?
quite correct. I said St. Boniface. It's St. Anthony. The chapel is connected to St. Boniface, but St. Anthony's Chapel. It is amazing.
How
It
does
is
that
utterly
happen?
amazing. Because the priest that founded it devoted his life to collecting relics.
But I mean, how do you go about like relics are property? Like how do you acquire that sort of like property? Like,
You ask.
hey buddy,
You right away.
you got a good relic for me?
Exactly. Well, no. I mean, since you ask, I'll pull off
I mean,
the history of the thing.
maybe he made a killing when like liberals didn't value relics as much, and so it's like
Well,
he found happy homes for
it's
things that might be discarded. Okay, I see how it's
no.
possible now.
I'll tell you what happened. It's the world's second largest collection. I have been there. Over 5,000.
5,000?
See the relics. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Okay. The chapel was founded by Father Soetbert Godfrey Bollinger, born in Belgium. He was educated in Amsterdam, studied medicine in Naples, Rome, and Genoa, went to seminary in Ghent, and then he came over to New York, and then to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and then Ohio. Ordained a priest in 1857 and became pastor of Most Holy Name of Jesus Parish in 1868. So he believed that he was a doctor, remember, he was trained as a doctor. He believed that miraculous healings could occur on his day, just as they were performed by Jesus and the apostles. He was a man of strong faith. In addition to his pastoral duties, would often tend to the physical needs and ailments of 100 to 150 people on a given day. On the Feast of Corpus Christi, or the Feast of St. Anthony of Padua, he would hold a healing service, which, depending on the year, was attended by 10 to 15,000 pilgrims from across North America and beyond. Father Bollinger is not only responsible for the design and construction of the beautiful shrine that is St. Anthony Chapel, but was also the sole proprietor of its vast collection of relics and other treasures, all of which came through the efforts of one individual knowing his purpose in life to know, love, and serve God. Uh, so the let me see, Shrines of Pittsburgh. Well, I'm looking at a website called Shrines of Pittsburgh, and it, yeah. See, they used to have more about him, but they don't now. Anyway, he was the priest that founded the place, and he put together an amazing thing, truly amazing.
All right, we are out of time. Any closing thoughts, Charles?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you want to know what they are? Fine. I'll tell you.
You can keep them to yourself. It's okay.
No, I feel the need to share.
Okay.
Just this. In the midst of all the stupidity that surrounds us, if you want to be happy, embrace idiocy.
All right. All right. Closing channel identification off the menu now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade Channel, talk radio the way it should be at crusadechannel.com. All right.
What is it? What is it if it's Monday?
It's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may be your own. See you next time, guys.
God bless everybody. See you next week. Ciao, ciao.